And everybody, I'm so impressed with this group. I confess I have not attended a meeting. Another confession, lived in Richmond Hill for 29 years, but actually moved to Newmarket in October of 2019. But still maintain strong connections to Richmond Hill, certainly through Richmond Hill United Church. Marge, it's kind of you to refer to me as an expert. I'm not sure I always feel like an expert because housing is a complicated issue. And so even the task of how do I condense, how do I focus this in half an hour or 20 minutes was a bit of a challenge, but I will do my best. I have always been interested in how communities across York Region understand the social issues that are happening in communities, who gets to tell the story of what's happening and how we work together to make change. I have been and continue to see myself as an advocate and have been highlighting issues to different levels of government at different times. And certainly around the issue of homelessness, I was particularly vocal and active between 2006 and 2011 when I worked with the York Regional Alliance to End Homelessness. I need to beg your forgiveness. I don't excel at PowerPoint presentations, and so I would love to have more graphic images today, but had some technical challenges. So I hope the content will make up for the lack of graphics, and I will direct you to some documents that will give you better graphics than you're going to see. But I certainly have tried to do my best. So let's see if we can, go forward. How are we going to do this? I can't move the slide. Let's see, hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay, so in terms of what I'm going to try and cover tonight, really sort of around the context around housing affordability, the challenge that is a really big challenge and has been getting worse, I would suggest, and I don't think anybody would disagree. There are particular elements to the challenge. There is a lot of effort going on to find solutions. A lot of that I'll be looking at sort of from a broader York Region perspective, and then zoom in a bit to the Richmond Hill context. And then a bit more around, other resources that you could find should you be interested, and things to engage in the not too distant future. So I just wanted to start with this quote because it came out of a relatively recent document, which is the region's measuring and monitoring affordable housing in York Region, which is something that they update every year to see how they're making progress. And so affordable ownership and rental housing is a key component for building complete communities, supporting community health, economic vitality, and growth in the region, local towns and cities. And it really does, I think, present the image that the region has in that it's not just about ownership. Rental is absolutely pivotal if we are going to have complete communities at a place where everybody can have housing that they can afford. And so rental has always been an interesting conversation across the region. And there are many reasons for this, and some of which we can sort of dig into. But I mean, the region since it's been incorporated in 1971 has changed dramatically from bedroom communities to now more connected and sort of urban cities and urban centers, increasingly diverse communities, huge economic change, the province driving where change is happening in communities. And throughout all of this, housing has emerged as a really, really significant and challenging issue. It is very evident from the growing number of York Region reports that housing is recognized as a challenging issue, and particularly around affordability. And I'm sure you're all aware of the challenge, and hence the invitation tonight. So I'm just going to dig in next to just to give you highlights about different levels of different levels of who the stakeholders are, because this is where the complexity comes. The federal government has a national housing strategy, affordable housing strategy, that was developed in 2018, and that is they are investing significant amounts of money to improve affordable housing across the country. The provincial government, their role is around legislation and policy direction to the region and other local municipalities. They also provide funding for affordable housing and homelessness. They are the overall housing system steward, and they create the planning legislation for growth management. York Region has a whole raft of strategies and plans related to housing. The overarching vision, most recently it's up to 2051, regional official plan, a strategic plan, a housing and homelessness plan. As the service system manager, they are responsible for community housing and homelessness initiatives, and of course work with local municipalities to help meet residents' needs. And they also have a housing corporation that I think there are 36 properties and over 4,000 tenants that they support. And then of course at the local level through official plans and zoning bylaws and regional policy implementation, all of this is a picture of the different roles that the government have in housing. And then there are the private sector and the non-profit sectors, who are obviously also key in terms of the development of different types of housing. Development industry obviously is a partner in this in a very big way, and people would often say also very challenging. And non-profit housing providers and service providers are also involved in, because they can develop non-profit and co-op housing and provide rental accommodation for some very vulnerable folks. They provide other low-income supports and special needs housing. So there's a whole range of stakeholders that are involved in housing. And I think it's part of the reason why it's so complicated to understand, and I think why people sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed in terms of understanding who's doing what and how to engage in the issue. In terms of, sorry, I'm working off two screens here. I wanted to lift up a few key challenges around affordability to touch on tonight. And a lot of the data that I'm sharing has come out of a document called Housing Matters, which was recently originally it was produced in 2012, and then it was updated in 2019. And so much of the data has come from that document, which is really wonderful. And in terms of helping you understand the scope of challenge. So cost of housing, obviously. So the price of housing has exceeded affordability thresholds for an increasing number of the region's population, not simply those living on low income, who have predominantly relied on rental and affordable ownership options. So this whole issue of affordability is spreading way beyond people that are living on low income. Housing Matters speaks about the housing gaps that exist in the region, and the term the missing middle is something that you may or may not be familiar with. And I'm going to speak a bit more about that in a few minutes. What else is significant is that York Region has the lowest supply of rental accommodation in the GTHA and one of the lowest vacancy rates. And it has had the smallest growth of purpose-built rental. And when there is pressure because of affordability in home ownership market, and there are huge sort of effects from that. The last thing I wanted to lift up in this very complex situation is the question of economic challenges that are facing residents and the slow rise in income compared to the exponential growth in housing prices. It's not very common that we hear about income challenges that people are facing across the region, but it is way more prevalent than people realize. I think often we talk about the prosperity of York Region, how things are fine, and on the surface, people appreciate or can see or look at big houses and think that everybody must be doing well. And there is a whole other reality. And I think this is starting to spread more and more. And so the more that we understand what's happening and who is impacted, the better we can understand the kinds of housing that we need in communities so that everybody can thrive. So in terms of housing affordability, this slide is really around the factors that impact affordability. So, housing affordability is the relationship between the ability to pay for housing and the cost of housing. Sounds pretty obvious. But low-cost housing is still technically unaffordable if households don't have the income required to pay for it. There are a huge number of factors that impact affordability. Actual household incomes, the stability of incomes, the extent to which they increase or not over time, housing supply, how diverse it is, does it meet the changing needs of the community, housing demand, changing demographics and growth, the cost of land availability and regulations, construction and development costs, interest rates, mortgage rates, and speculation. There are people who are purchasing houses for the purposes of investment only. They may or may not live in them. But that is also a challenge in communities across the region. Sorry, I'm just... So just to dig a little deeper in terms of housing gaps, there was an excellent graphic in the Housing Matters, and I just couldn't get it all together to put it on the slide. However, this is the essence of the graphic. The lowest earning 40% of households, so those folks earning less than 80,000, are unlikely to find housing they can afford in the private market, and are eligible for rent subsidies. And that is somewhat theoretical because there are not sufficient rent subsidies for the people that need them. The mid-range, and this, remember what I said about the missing middle, the mid-range 20% of households, approximately 80K to 120K, have incomes classified as requiring housing that is affordable based on the provincial definition, and are traditionally expected to be served by the private market. And the highest earning 40%, so that's 120,000 and upwards, are expected to find adequate housing in the private market. In the current system, the lowest earning 80% of households are challenged to find suitable housing options with respect to unit size, type, and location. And York Region has the third highest average price for single detached units in 2018 in the GTHA, behind Halton and Toronto, which really is pretty alarming when you think about what is happening in communities. So back here to the missing middle. So the ownership market in York Region is highly polarized. And so there's a strong supply of high-priced single detached units and affordable one-bedroom condos. But there's a lack of affordable mid-sized housing to meet the needs of families. And this has a spillover effect. Households end up spending too much on housing costs because they don't feel they have any choice. If people are priced out of the market completely, they will increase demand for rental housing that exists and the supply is very low, which then will increase the cost, the likely cost for rental housing due to increased demand. And there will be a reduction in vacancy rates. And in terms of availability of rental housing supply in York Region, we have the lowest supply in the GTA at 14%, compared to Toronto that has 48%, and one of the lowest vacancy rates. Between 2007 and 2018, vacancy rates have been well below 3%, which is considered sort of a good vacancy rate that gives people choice and in terms of where they would like to live and the type of accommodation they are seeking. In 2019, 262 rental units were built, but of those 162 were built by the region and were community housing. 100 registered second suites were added. There was no purpose-built rental built, and while the condo market contributes it's the secondary rental market, but it's more expensive than purpose-built and mostly smaller units, one sort of studio or 1 and 2 bedroom units, maybe two, mostly 1 bedroom units. The economic challenges that are facing residents are significant. there has been a slow rise in incomes compared to the growth of housing costs. This is not something I think that people know necessarily, but York Region's low income rate was, in 2016, was 17%, which was higher than the Ontario and Canadian average. Residents living on low income are spread across the region. Markham has the highest rate at 21.5% in 2016. Richmond Hill was a close second with 20.9%. In 2016, York Region had the highest percentage of renters and owners spending 70% of their income on more on housing costs. And in 2019, the number of applicants on York Region's housing waitlist, so this is a waitlist that York Region holds for people that are needing housing subsidy, grew by 7.5% to over 17,400 households. And annually, we can barely house 300 people off that list. So the list hardly moves and it gets longer every year, which is very concerning, which means that there are people in extreme circumstances who are waiting for subsidy and wait years and years and years to find affordable housing. So there is a growing gap in the capacity of communities to meet the need for community housing. And as the region continues to grow, it is expected that low income rates will continue to rise along with affordable housing requirements. I'm not going to speak to this at great length, but I want to refer you to this document produced by United Way. It's the third of 3 reports about income inequality. And it really speaks to different groups within the community are differentially impacted by income inequality. And if we want to have inclusive communities where everybody can thrive, we need to pay attention to what is actually happening in communities and people who are really struggling, the extent to which we understand who they are and why they're struggling. Because if we are separate from one another and we don't understand these other realities, we cannot come together with the right solutions to ensure that everybody can have a good life and have the housing that they need and access to opportunity. So zooming in now to the Richmond Hill context, the strategic plan of Richmond Hill has indeed a housing statement that housing provides options for all people at all stages of life. Richmond Hill in the York Region context has the highest proportion of owner and tenant households experiencing affordability issues. Over 62% are paying less than 30%, so that would mean they are living in affordable accommodation. But 17% are paying between 30 and 49%, 6.9% are paying between 50 to 69%, and almost 14% are paying 70% plus. And if you think about what that does to a household, if that is what they have to pay to keep body and soul together and a roof over their head, and what that must do to putting food on the table and any other costs that they have to incur. These next comments I got off the Richmond Hill Affordable Housing website, and I'll speak to this a bit more about this, but the demographics in Richmond Hill are changing. So there will be a growth of millennials, and 1 in 5 will be seniors. So communities have to look at what are the demographics, what is the kind of housing that people need, how are we going to plan and look forward to ensure that people have what they need, and include issues of affordability. You are well aware of the official plan. I think the Richmond Hill is updating, and it's committing to more options for housing types and a range of affordability. An engagement plan, I think, is in development, and the affordable housing strategy is also being developed alongside. So again, I got this off the Richmond Hill website. So it will be looking at tools and tactics to ensure that housing geared to middle income households are provided through the development process. I don't think that's to the exclusion of those at the lower end, but it's to also ensure that their middle income households have different options. There will be a handbook for developers, and they will be looking at a range of options to increase the supply that can meet current and future needs. In terms of finding solution, there is a whole lot going on. The York Region official plan, I think will be going to council in the second quarter of 2021. There is continued effort to increase the supply of affordable private market rental. Oh, commutation, that's interesting. That was not accommodation, I think, is what I meant to say. This has not been overly successful so far, but there are continued efforts to build this sector of the housing market. Vaughan, Richmond Hill and Markham are all updating official plans and developing affordable housing strategies as we speak. York Region, actually at the recent Committee of the Whole meeting in January on the 14th, when they updated, we're providing an update around the official plan and housing, so sort of what some options might be. They provided a list of various models that could help address the issue, but they still have to be evaluated and costed in terms of effectiveness and feasibility. But there's a whole lot of resources that they are providing, I think, to municipalities. Inclusionary zoning is something that can be implemented by local municipalities, and it's the only tool mandated by the province that can mandate affordable housing in new developments, and the responsibility for that sits at the local level. And I think the comment at Committee of the Whole was that Markham was furthest ahead with this. Local municipalities can obviously identify local priorities and solutions. And there is a York Region local municipal housing working group that continue to work with together, I think, on sort of wrestling these very challenging situations. I just wanted to sort of coming to the end here, talk about complete communities. This notion of a varied housing supply with a full range of options and including affordable options is critical if we want to create communities where people can thrive. It's important for inclusion. It's important for environmental reasons. It's important for economic development. And fundamentally, it is a sort of it is a social determinant of health and contributes to individual and community health and well-being. I have a whole sort of list here, not the web links, I'm afraid, but a whole list of documents that are useful in terms of York Region documents in terms of helping you understand the scope of the challenge and some of the work that is being done. Housing Matters is the one that I referenced earlier, and it really is quite a comprehensive technical document that helps explain the challenges that everybody is facing. So those are some resources that might be helpful. In terms of further research that you might consider, in addition to the strategies and reports, I refer again to the Income Inequality Report. Also, the term the missing middle, this another word for this is gentle density, and it's more different approaches to increasing density in existing neighborhoods. And Evergreen and the Canadian Urban Institute and the Ryerson City Building Institute have things on their website that you might be interested in. I would encourage, I mean, I think you're already monitoring the official plan, and I'm assuming affordable housing strategies that are in development. But it's really important to continue to monitor what's happening, who's doing what, and to understand where opportunities for input are. And I would just flag also, the work of the Social Planning Council of York Region, who have a position on housing as a human right. They are an unfunded organization who have been working diligently on so many issues for so long, well over 10 years. They have been instrumental in forming a new affordable housing coalition of York Region. And this link is to a recent document that they submitted, which I thought might be of interest. And I would also encourage you to watch, if you have not seen, a documentary on TVO called Push. And it is the UN rapporteur on housing, who is on a global search to understand what is happening in cities that is making housing such a problem, and the issue of affordability. And it is very illuminating, and I would encourage you to watch that. I think I've come to the end. I hope this has made some sense, and I'm happy to answer any questions. It's a very high-level overview. I could have talked at length about the hardship that people are experiencing across this region. There was a whole other presentation that could be done on people who are living so close to the edge, over the edge in this region, and it's extraordinarily difficult. And that's a whole other presentation. So I hope tonight that this has met your needs, and I'm happy to answer any questions.